Hello? All right, I know that everyone's raring to go, so I might just give you a couple of seconds to settle in. It's not going to be that long a night. You need to settle in too much, don't worry. Thank you all for coming. It's a bit misleading with this COVID social distancing that it looks like a sparse room, but it actually is a fantastic turnout. So it's a testament, I think, to how excited people are to have a role like the Chief Entrepreneur here in the region to meet and mingle and learn from, and also of the significance and importance of innovation and thinking differently and looking for new opportunities at a time like this when the world as we know it is sort of turned upside down. So before we go any further, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, and for those of you who, particularly for our guests from Brisbane, I'm sure that you'll have noticed what a beautiful and stunning area it is. So I think that all of us can appreciate the connection that a traditional owner group would have to the land and to a region like this. And so we certainly acknowledge and pay our respects to those groups, and there are many across the tablelands. Now, if you'll just indulge me a little bit as we get started, so that we can get a feel for who we have in the room here. So if you are in a business, in a small business yourself, could you put your hand up for me? So that covers most people. Now, if you are an entrepreneur, could you put your hand up for me? We've got a good number here. That's pretty good. If you're in a business and you're an innovator in a business, or you're in a business that's innovating in any way, could you put your hand up for me? Fantastic. I have a feeling that only about half of the hands went up that should have there. And one of the things that I love about Leanne coming to town is that she always makes me discover in pulling together the invitation list and the stakeholders to meet with her just how much innovation and entrepreneurial businesses that we actually have in our region. And we always sell ourselves short on this factor, but it's just incredible to see some of the innovative work that is going on in our little far north Queensland area, that is from farmers who are innovating and selling their products to all over the world, to software platforms to support farms, to apps that are being developed, to blockchain work that's being done. It's really incredible the amount of innovation and entrepreneurialism that actually happens here that we often forget to celebrate and often forget to talk ourselves up as a region and how high and how significantly we're punching above our weight in that area. So it's great that we get to rediscover this when someone like Leanne comes to visit, but hopefully we can remind ourselves to celebrate it and pat ourselves on the back and put our entrepreneurs and our innovators on the pedestal that they deserve more often throughout the year as well. Now, one of the best things that we can do, in my opinion, and in my role with Tablelands Regional Council, I believe in supporting innovation, is to encourage collaboration and to encourage opportunities like this. And it's something that I've been very lucky to be able to support in my role with Startup and Innovation Tablelands as well. It's so easy to think that you can come along to a talk like this or to sign up to a Tony Robbins conference or something, and that you'll get all the answers and you'll learn everything you need to know overnight. But the truth is, one of the most important things about innovation and one of the most important things about being an entrepreneur is building that culture as a region, is making sure that you have that support network to continuously learn, to continuously evolve, to continuously have the opportunity and the ability to rise to new challenges as they come up in your business. And so I think that opportunities like this is really great to try and get everyone together, to get businesses that are doing things a bit differently, to get entrepreneurs, to get innovators together into a room and make those connections and find where your objectives align with others, that you can harness opportunities together, and that's particularly what we need to do in a small region like ours. It's only by working together that we can really reach our potential. So we do have not just one guest, but a couple of very special guests tonight who have made their way here to speak to you. And the first one that I'd like to introduce is Nicole Kelly. Nicole is the Executive Director of Innovation, and I could just pause there, and she's the Executive Director of All Innovation, but she is specifically with the Queensland Government in the Department of State Development, Tourism and Innovation. So Nicole leads that office that is running many programs that present opportunities like this and others to entrepreneurs in regions like ours. So it's great to be able to have you here, Nicole, and to showcase our region to you and introduce you to our audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Callum, and it's wonderful to be here. It's my first time in Atherton, and it's such a beautiful area that you live in, so I envy you. I will be back to grey Brisbane on Friday, and I'll be very sad and be thinking up at this beautiful spot. As I say, it's my first time here, and it's been so interesting already today, and no doubt Leanne will touch on that later, but just in the conversations that we've had with people who are doing such innovative things, and I think that Callum was correct, sometimes people in these small areas who are doing such amazing things sell themselves short or don't necessarily think of themselves as startups or innovators. They think I'm a business, but they're doing some really interesting things, and there's so much potential. I will not speak for too long because you don't want to hear from a boring bureaucrat when you've got Leanne Kemp in the room, but I did just want to, I guess, set a bit of the scene around the state government's commitment to innovation. And so for over 20 years now, starting with the Smart State, Queensland Government has recognised that innovation is critical for our state. We're a successful state and have been, we've got some great natural resources, and so it was also a recognition you can't just rest on those laurels. They're great, and it's excellent that we've got some really key industries and some strong ones in areas like this around agriculture, around tourism, etc. But we need to always be looking at, well, where are things moving? Where is the future? How do we make sure that our economy is diversified so that people who are born in a beautiful place like this can create a job here, can stay here, can have a family, can grow a business, can go global and stay in a beautiful environment like this? And so the initiative that I am lucky enough to be an executive in is called Advanced Queensland. And so that is a suite of a number of programs. Over the years, it started in 2015, and it was a $180 million investment into a few programs. It is now a $755 million investment, and so obviously it has diversified as we learn what's working, where are the gaps, what do we need to do. So I guess what we really want to make sure we're doing, sometimes there's a perception that you have to move to Southeast Queensland, or that really big businesses can only happen from Southeast Queensland or out of Queensland. And that is not the case at all. And so what we want to do is, through our regional programs, and we have some, but where we're looking to mature those programs, is to really understand the different environments. So this community is quite different to Goondiwindi, is quite different to the Gold Coast. And so one size doesn't fit all, and we don't want it to fit all. We really want to work collaboratively with the business owners, whether you see yourselves as startups or not. It's important that we have successful businesses in these regions. We want to work with local council, and we're very lucky that we have a good relationship already. We want to be able to connect you with federal government opportunities you might not be aware of. We want to help connect the corporates, the bigger businesses, and sources of risk capital and venture capital, because everyone needs a source of funding, right? So what we want to do is work with the community, because government is not here to do everything. We cannot do everything, nor should we do everything. But a role we can play is helping to make those connections, because these innovation, in whatever you think of it as, and it's meaningful for this community, I would say, to really try and identify and have the conversations around what is real for innovation in this community, because it shouldn't and can't be a buzzword. You don't have to think of tech guys in black T-shirts and, goatee beards over in Silicon Valley. That's not what innovation is. It's one type, but there's so many other types. So we want to help understand the communities to see what role we could or should play, and what roles other people in this community can play, and how we can connect you outside of your community in a way that will help. So there are, successful innovators, there are successful opportunities and ideas and platforms that you could be connecting into that we can probably help, make you aware of, I guess. So we really focus on understanding what your community needs, what we can do to help you co-create your own success, I guess. So that's probably all I really needed to say. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of the stories from the people in the room.
Thank you very much for that, Nicole, and we appreciate you making the trip up here to visit us as well. And I'd just follow up with that, follow that up with a comment that Advanced Queensland has been really fantastic in supporting the regions, and I think that should just be acknowledged. And we have Carmel here who engages for that department for the FNQ region, and Carmel is always on the phone to me and sending me emails and wanting to know about what's happening in the region. So please, as a business, as an innovator, as an entrepreneur out there, if you've got something exciting happening and you're wondering where the Queensland government can fit in to not always support, sometimes it's just making connections with the right people for you or showing you what's out there, what sort of support is out there, then make sure that you don't hide in the shadows. Make yourself known to me or to Carmel tonight, or you can always make yourself known to me at council, and I can make those connections for you, because we really do appreciate the support that they've done working directly with local businesses in our area and making these sorts of visits. So on that, we will move on to the main event, and I'd just like to bring up our Mayor of the Tablelands Regional Council to introduce our guest speaker, Leanne. The Mayor, and I can say this, the Mayor and the newly elected council are very keen to support businesses and support the local economy and business community, and we're almost ready to release TRC's Smart Community Roadmap, which will be a really exciting milestone for the region of providing a path forward for innovation and entrepreneurship in our area. So it's very opportune to have this opportunity to bring, at this time, to bring the Mayor up and to introduce Leanne and have her here tonight. Thank you. I'll pass over to Mayor Rod Marty.
Thanks, Callum. Thank you very much. And thank you to Startup Innovation Tablelands. It's a great pleasure to be here, and it's a tribute to all the people who put so much energy and effort into driving this organisation. So thank you very much. Leanne Kemp is founder and CEO of Everledger and Queensland's third chief entrepreneur. She is a highly regarded leader in many fields, including technology and insurance, and well known for her innovations using blockchain technology to track high-value assets such as diamonds, art and wine. Leanne works on a global scale to encourage entrepreneurship and innovation, and is an advocate of sustainability in business. Leanne is an expert advisor to the World Economic Forum, the World Trade Board's Sustainable Trade Action Group, the IBM Blockchain Platform Board of Advisors. She was also recently appointed as an adjunct professor in the Institute for Future Environment at the Queensland University of Technology. Leanne has won many awards, including Innovator of the Year twice, and most importantly, she is right here in the centre of the universe in the Atherton Tablelands tonight. Leanne.
Thank you, Mayor. Oh, I can hear my own voice. That's outrageous, isn't it? Thank you for having me. I think I'll take that too. I don't mind, right? Like a baby with a dummy. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Second time in the Atherton Tablelands for me. I was here in about August last year, where I was divinely privileged to be actually in the room right next door with a whole bunch of budding entrepreneurs for the better part of a day and a night and a day. So it was great to be connected. Before I kick off, just a couple of questions. Who can guess my first job when I left school? Doctor, lawyer, Macca's. I was tempted today to go through a drive-through, but it wasn't Macca's. Can anyone guess? Sports coach? Anyone? Doctor? Anyone? No one. Mechanic? An apprentice instrument fitter. That'd be a great career path. The reality is I am unemployable. So I've never had a real job. In fact, I don't even have a resume to give anyone, even if I wanted a job. I've spent the better part of 25 years being really curious and solving problems. And you know what that is? That's a small business owner. That is someone who has enough trust and faith to be able to put trust and faith in themselves, embark upon a learning journey and create a business. So, I've been relatively blessed in that I've never had to ask Dad to borrow money, and I've started a number of companies, all technology businesses. I'm also a self-taught engineer, which is another one of those accidental moments in life when you start to employ people around you, when you either find yourself firing them or them leaving, and all of a sudden you've got to learn a new skill because you have customers that are willing to pay you, but you don't have anyone to be the cook in the kitchen. So I became a self-taught engineer. And you could imagine leaving school in the late 80s, there were no university programs for entrepreneurship, and there certainly was not female engineering courses or women in technology. There was just no such thing. And for me to embark upon a self-taught engineering journey, it would normally mean a commitment to university of 4 to 6 and even 8 years to come remotely close. So one would say I've done it the hard way, but I say I've probably done it the right way, because every business that I've started, I haven't had the blessing other than extending a few credit cards and, running directly into revenue for me, to finding the customer, what's the needs, what's the problem to be solved, has actually been my entrepreneurial journey. I've been really curious about new technologies, whether it be blockchain or things like smart card technology and RFID, which is technology now that is in, the ear tags of cows. And I was fortunate enough in the mid-90s to track things from kangaroos to cows across Queensland. And who would have known, now I'm tracking diamonds around the world. And I guess it's because of that lived experience. And I'm a Brisbane girl. I have 2 washing machines in the world today, one in Brisbane and one in London. And you can tell I've been washing all my clothes this year in my Brisbane house, because there's certainly been not a lot of opportunity to travel. But in 5 short years, I started a business in the heart of London, and I was determined to solve a really big problem. One that stayed with me in my late teens, when I watched what I thought was a heartthrob, Leonardo DiCaprio. Anyone know Leonardo DiCaprio? Not a bad bit of candy to look at. And it wasn't the Titanic. It was a movie called Blood Diamonds. Many have probably watched it, if not watched it again. It stayed with me for years and years. Coming from Australia, we have zero tolerance to child labour or conflict minerals. It's just foreign for me when I watch that movie to think that that's a reality in the world and in my world. So being blessed enough to be in my mid-40s, to know how to run a business and take an idea and trust in myself and learn, I started a company in the heart of London in 2015. We have about 110 people today, and we operate in 6 countries in the world. Queensland's Chief Entrepreneur, the role itself, is actually a program of works that was established about 4 years ago under Advanced Queensland. And my role is an honorary role. So I'm the 3rd Chief Entrepreneur to be appointed. I'm the first female, which is great, tick that box, giddy up. But what's more important is the fact that I'm the first Chief Entrepreneur to be appointed that's running a business at the same time. So the challenges of entrepreneurs today, I'm facing it. I was literally walking in the back of the room with my phone in my ear, which people may have seen me. I'm connecting to my team across the world. A real business is running in concurrency to me doing this role here today. It's typically a 12-month tenure, and it's been extended for 2 years, which is the first time as well it's been extended. So I think I'm a bit of a slow learner. It's taken me a bit longer to get things done, but we're also making sure that the entrepreneurs, even small business owners, are connected with how to innovate. And of course, innovation is such a big word, and often startups, you'd think, are regarded for hoodie-wearing hippies that come out of university or sitting on beanbags. It's quite the opposite, in fact. A lot of the work that we do are with people that are just simply trying to solve a problem or to build a business, and that's the work that we've embarked upon. So anyone in the room, when I think about COVID, I was in China in December, and then I flew to Switzerland, and I'm one of the global chairs for the World Economic Forum. So I'm there every year in Davos, which you may or may not see, but it's where the 1% of the 1% fly in on their private jets, and all the prime ministers and presidents join up and talk about what's important for the world. And it was on the 20th of January this year is when I first heard of COVID, and I was in a room with some Chinese officials. The next day, disappeared. I thought, wow, here's something interesting. I pulled my team out of China on the 22nd of January, and I flew straight home. And I knew at that moment that we were seeing something that we'd never seen before. I, of course, was building businesses around the same time as the global financial crisis. I had a business that was operating in the US when 9/11 struck. And so I'm used to these economic challenges and downturns and the dot-com bubble, but we're certainly seeing a number of things colliding against the shores of reality. And when I think about the current time, has anyone read a book called Who Moved My Cheese? Yeah, it's a New York bestseller. If you haven't read it, pick it up and read it. Because the reality is they didn't just move the cheese, the whole maze has moved. So all of a sudden, I'm coming back home and I know entrepreneurs are going to face some pretty big struggles. But not only that, the skill sets we have as entrepreneurs or startups, we work in a certain way in uncertainty. That's our sweet spot. We really love that. We love the uncertainty within things because we seek to find. We also are really curious, so we have an experimental activity that just sits within us. We don't see failure as something that's negative. We see it as a part of a first attempt in learning, FAIL, which is part of the work that we do in schools around Queensland. And for the first time, this skill set, right, is really important. It's so important that it's also now being called out by governments. Entire government departments are seeking entirely new ways to work. And I'm not just talking about connecting to a Zoom call or a Skype line or trying to Zoom something digitally. I'm talking about the way upon which we help to frame the problem and seek an entirely different solution. We were talking today with the startup team and startup Tablelands about what's the purpose of being a startup ecosystem. And it's a big question that we need to ask ourselves. What's the value we're creating? And just because we're connecting in different ways through technology or in a digital format, it doesn't necessarily mean that the car that we drove into the relationship with is the same car that you're driving out of. So it's the first time we're able to rethink value. It's the first time that we are all sitting in the same choppy seas, but not everyone is in the same boat. So how do we rethink this particular point in time? Economic recovery is on the front minds of many leaders in the world, and in fact many business owners. How do we just get normal back? And I wrote something as chief entrepreneur and thought about it's not just the time, it's not just time passing when things will return. The economic recovery exists on a Z and a Y axis, but there's another axis that's third dimension. As we start becoming embedded in being able to connect digitally, that's how we, the status quo of how we connect. Things like telemedicine will become the normal in terms of regional reach for healthcare. This is an entirely new stream of economic value that's going to be created. Australia as a whole is seen as COVID safe. And of course, we're struggling right now with the closure of our borders, both domestically and internationally. But soon, this time too will pass, as my father once said to me, the wise old farmer, and we will start to invite entirely new visitors to this country, other countries that are COVID safe. It's likely that we will transact with Malta before we transact with the United States in terms of international visitors, because they're COVID safe. So the experiences and the customer, as I said, it's not just about the customer returning. Someone moved the entire maze. It's a really cheap buy, by the way, the Who Moved My Cheese. I think you can even pick up secondhand copies on eBay for like $4. I can't underestimate, it's a short read, 15, 20 minutes. You could do it with a cup of coffee or a good gin and tonic, but it helps to frame the mind when you're faced with a challenge. The Chief Entrepreneur's Office also recognised this country has incredible natural assets. Great Barrier Reef and tourism, yes, of course, and also our natural resources, agriculture and rare earths and metals and minerals, even diamonds is a prime example. But we also have incredible natural talent. And right now, that's the role of the Chief Entrepreneur's Office to make those connections and to help with the skill set. So we'll post up some real big thought leadership pieces that might be helpful. In the midst of COVID, government, of course, began to refactor the needs and the requirements. And I think we spoke even deeply today about being in the business of entrepreneurship. How do we get that better business skill and that learned muscle? And parts of those programs are new programs that we've underpinned in government, which was entirely new programs of work that came out of the needs of the state. And the second part of the work that we've been doing is to ensure that entrepreneurship isn't just held within hoodie-wearing hippies that like to sit on beanbags and eat cold pizza. We have farmers that are solving problems that don't even know the incredible inventions that they've put on their land and that they've shared with their mates or their next door neighbours. So how can we take and propel that into an entirely new business? Intrapreneurs, those that sit within corporate roles or even within government, that have this really frustrating mindset change that they can't get through hierarchical order. And parts of the work that we did was to share what we call a toolbox, this sort of founder toolbox session, which was lived experiences from those who have been successful and failed, but have actually walked the pathway to grow businesses and or downsize those businesses. And we share that information through the Chief Entrepreneur's Office through our newsletter every fortnight and also a podcast. If you search on Spotify, my young niece was super excited when she thought I was on Spotify. She thought I was one of those TikTok fans, and I finally managed to dance in the mirror, only to find out that my Spotify account is a boring podcast. So this also comes out every second week. So newsletter 1 week, podcast the next week. And it connects with people in our ecosystem. The world leader for the World Economic Forum for technologies like blockchain, the head of Airbnb for Australia and New Zealand, small business owners, literally hairdressers and barbershops that are struggling through this time. And we also then dig deep in the last part of the session, which I Leanne explained. So any of the women in the room that get mansplained, I get mansplained every week, someone who explains to me what a certain type of technology is. So we run through our very deep content around just because you're the founder of a company doesn't make you a CEO. And so what are the skills that are needed? Culture eats strategy. Culture in an organisation is critically important. How do I talk to my staff when the reality is the customer's gone? How do I do this? How do I keep the value creation moving? So there's some really interesting sets of education material that hopefully will help. And the other engagement through our office is on roundtables, looking at things from a technical perspective or even an industry perspective. We've also more recently brought up large investments in things like artificial intelligence. When we think about the world as we know it today, the internet is critically important. It's on Maslow's triangle. Yet we haven't necessarily plumbed that into our thinking. At the very top level in our federal policy, of course, we're not calling out the internet as one of the most important digital infrastructures of our time. And when we think about artificial intelligence, it's here to stay. So if there is a farmer in the room, if there's a shop owner in the room, and you don't know what AI is, and I'm not talking about artificial insemination, I'm talking about artificial intelligence, and you're not understanding how it can be used, not necessarily the coding language, then that's the second book you need to pick up, is around AI. And the next generation that is coming through will have incredible value creation jobs that we've never seen before. So we've already seen this in Queensland. With the adoption of robotics and automated systems, there's this scaremongering about it's going to replace jobs. In fact, we have the data in front of us now that for every automated robot that is put into a factory or onto a floor, it creates at least 4 to 6 jobs. So this is the next wave of reality that's coming today. I don't really have too much more to say, but no doubt we're opening up for questions, answers, arm wrestling. I'm pretty good at doing the worm, getting a bit old for it now, but I could do that as a stage
Taking
trick.
requests then?
Yeah, no requests at the moment. And maybe that is where we open it up.
That's fantastic. So we do have plenty of time for questions, and I'll throw it in as well. We've got time for anyone who wants to share their own story, their own experience. Leanne is really eager to hear about what's happening in this space in the Tablelands, big or small. So if you just want to share your story of innovation in your business, I'm sure she'd be very happy to hear that as well. But does anyone have any questions to kick us off with?
Leanne, can you explain what blockchain is, how you got involved in this technology? I know a little bit about it, but not much.
So blockchain originated as the database layer that sat under a cryptocurrency called Bitcoin. Does anyone know what Bitcoin is? Went crazy, right, in 2017. I bought Bitcoin quite early in the stage, in around 2010, and sold it in 2017. So it's always about the price you buy and the time you sell. And what I was imagining was the use of the technology not as a currency, but as a way to track something that's valuable. And of course, one of the most compressed valued objects on the planet that faces a number of issues, whether it even be counterfeit goods or child-induced labour as a prime example, is the diamond industry. So we started there, and we track diamonds as they're extracted from the earth, right the way through into India where they're cut and polished, and then into the retail outlets. So you walk into a Tiffany store today, the Tiffany store will be able to tell you where that diamond comes from.
Speaking of innovation, we are actually, for the first time ever, we're live streaming this online so that people can watch it anywhere. So kudos to Startup Tablelands for embracing that. And on that note, we have a question from the live stream. So, Leanne, how do you see the next 12 months playing out in terms of challenges and opportunities and trends?
So I've spent 71,000 kilometres last year travelling across Queensland, and when the Premier said we're good to go in August, I was out the door like you would not believe, and I thought it's time for us to give it a go. And what I've seen in the last 6 months is a really interesting 2, if not 3-speed economy. There are definitely sections, geographical sections and industry sections that are completely imploded for various reasons, particularly if we think about travel and tourism and aviation. And yet there are other sections geographically in the midst of Queensland. I was in Charleville probably 2 weeks ago and drove from Charleville right the way back into Toowoomba and Brisbane. And parts of the tourism assets that are out there are 300% up on last year. There are definitely life choices that many people are making that have been brought forward from the future to now. Some of those are under forced circumstances of employment. But what I see the next 12 months doing is, again, in a pace that is a 2-speed environment. There is going to be a lot of trepidation about the customer returning, but those that can explore who the new customer is and deeply understand if the service you're providing, the goods you're providing, are somewhat of an essential service rather than a discretionary spend, then they're the companies that are going to survive and thrive through this time. And so what I mean by an essential service, things like, medical help, that's an essential service regardless of the concerns of the day. But things that are discretionary spends that are easy to actually cut from the household budget is going to be a very difficult business to underpin well moving into the future. And we see it in a lump. And I think Queensland has fared incredibly well given how we've handled the closing of borders and where we're at in terms of economic strengthening. And that data will now start to show entirely different stories to what it was even 6 months ago, let alone last year. It's clear that our habits and the fear that was around digital technologies is going away. So areas in the world, not just only here in Queensland, that aren't reliant upon heavy infrastructure or really burdenous approval systems will actually put digital infrastructure rapidly in, and entirely new industries, skill sets, people will evolve. We've seen it already before in the world, in places like China where they didn't have fixed infrastructure. And so their banking system was driven on QR codes. and the transfer of money and applications, these really big systems exist, like things like WeChat, as a prime example, runs not just talking to each other, but purchasing of goods. What we will see is this increased sense of technology becoming trusted when the technology can enable this peer-to-peer exchange rather than centrality of exchange. And we're starting to see that now with technologies like blockchain as a prime example in the world. So those that can also, if you're sitting inside of government housing and making decisions about infrastructure, should also be plumbing directly into core infrastructure, digital services. If it's a road, how is that going to be considered in terms of artificial intelligence to make decisions around the materials in that road? If they're laying a road, is there core infrastructure around internet services that can be laid at the same time? Typically, we've been looking at building houses, and then services digitally come as a second nature. But we have an opportunity now to reinvest in infrastructure in ways that are completely plumbed digitally. And there'd be one regional town that I've been through the whole of Queensland that has a deliberate digital infrastructure roadmap that they've called out. And that digital infrastructure roadmap is connected to everything, right, across all of the investments that they're making in assets that, of course, aren't just houses as a prime example, making smart homes. No, they're actually making the decision and asking, how does digital play a role in this?
I'm going to put in a claim for us to be the second region that you've come through once our smart community roadmap's passed this week, hopefully. Any other questions? I'm sure there's lots. I'll come to you in a moment, sorry.
Hello, everybody. Leanne, you were speaking about the decentralisation and observing and listening to radio reports about what Australians are doing. There's talk of people moving out of the cities, personally, I've moved from Melbourne back to this region because my family are Queenslanders, moved there at the beginning of the year, moved back here. I think about infrastructure and I wonder what the government is, are they planning to put more infrastructure, particularly into education, in rural areas? And I think specifically, I'm speaking specifically to, you mentioned core business or core industries, excuse me, not knowing the terms, but essential services. So essential services, education is one of them, and I observed at Cairns, or TNQ TAFE in Cairns, that a lot of the infrastructure from things that were perceived to be not core, visual arts, for instance, were not essential. But then there's also evidence that visual arts, for instance, can improve mental health. So just using that as one example of we need to address people's mental health as we're isolated, and that people are moving from city centres to regional cities and destinations. We can work anywhere now, so let's move away. Are the government speaking about reinvesting in education for locals, because we're not going to be able to rely on perhaps our foreign students coming in?
So you've got sort of two questions in there. One, it's okay. I'm going to pass the voice of the government to the voice of the government rather than me, who's just an honorary muppet that's wearing a rainbow hoodie. I'm going to talk about infrastructure and digital infrastructure and internet and connected services. There is a number of things that are occurring. Firstly, the connection between the peer-to-peer between two mobile phones and Bluetooth. Most people know what Bluetooth is in the room. Okay, that's the ability to connect between two devices close to each other, right the way up to the infrastructure that sits up in space, which is our satellite dishes. You know, there's this massive set of qubit satellites, and Australia plays a huge role in sending a lot of that infrastructure up to space. Elon Musk, Tesla, is literally creating an entire communications blanket around the world. I call it MuskNet. So we're seeing in our own backyard here in Australia, communities just getting on with it because they can. So things like LoRaWAN networks that can be a big tower, 30 metres in the middle of a farm somewhere out in St George, can put that tower up with a tractor, connect the LoRaWAN network and point to the nearest Telstra station that could actually be 400 kilometres away. So there is now layers of communication that were typically separated. So you needed infrastructure from Telstra, you needed infrastructure from the mobile phone providers, and then even separate to satellite. All of that's being blurred together now in a way that's becoming affordable. So we're seeing where the gaps are in innovation and in infrastructure are coming together, and they're coming together in an affordable way. So much so, those towers, right, with the farms in the middle of St George, he was able to construct that entire tower in the tens of thousands, right, which is a very small investment for a farm the size that he has, in comparison to millions of dollars worth of infrastructure that you might be waiting on 5 years' time with NBN and Telstra. So that technology is now becoming commoditised. It's literally tick and flick. Yeah. Government.
Thanks.
And this is where we all snooze.
Thanks very much. So obviously I don't work for the Department of Education, but I can talk about the conversations that are happening within government and across government around connectivity and infrastructure. I guess before I do that, I just wanted to pick up one of the creative arts in education and in a range of things, and that is a recognition. There has been a lot of conversation in education around STEM and needing to get more people studying STEM subjects, which is science, technology, engineering and maths. And I already know what Leanne's going to interrupt with after I say this, but I know, I'm ready. But there's increasingly a conversation around STEAM, and that recognises the importance of arts as well. So, because the arts is so creative, and it plays as much in the space around creativity, innovation. There's companies like the X Factor, which is an organisation located in California, and it runs big global challenges they're worth millions of dollars. And one of the processes that they follow, yes, they have a lot of engineers they work with, yes, they have a lot of coders and techies and Silicon Valley black t-shirt guys, but they also bring in science fiction writers and artists when they're looking at a challenge to collectively try and imagine the future and then work backwards or backcast around, well, to get to that future, what is it that's involved? So I just wanted to pick up that point that, it's not that the creative arts are off on a side and then there's, engineering, coding, tech, there's here and then there's this over here. The combination of those brings a much richer experience and outcome. To get to the question around connectivity, so the Queensland government, governments, I think, throughout Australia are recognising the importance of connectivity, and COVID, if nothing else, has really brought that home when suddenly kids are working from home, teachers are working from home, everyone's working from home. And so what we have been, and Queensland's, it's got its own challenges, it's a fantastic state to live in. It is big, and it's geographically dispersed in a way like that Western Australia is not. Western Australia is big, but everyone pretty much lives along the spine. So Queensland does have its unique challenges around what we need to try and cater for. The importance of connectivity is so critical, and it's recognised. And so government is working in a range of ways. We have taken our first steps into utilising the infrastructure that's already there. So government has invested in infrastructure, and to Leanne's point before around we used to build things and then overlay or later on we'd look at the connectivity or the digital infrastructure, and government's done that as well, like everyone has. And so government has gone, right, we'll build rail and we'll put in fibre for that, or we'll build power and we'll put in the fibre for that, and usually they put in more than they need, and so there's a latency there that has not been utilised. So one of the initiatives that we implemented and it kicked off last year is called QCN Fibre, and that is around recognising that government has got government-owned infrastructure that is not being used to its full capacity. So it's around opening that up, which encourages competition and helps local ISPs, and it makes it more affordable. It doesn't yet put connectivity into remote areas where it's not, but it's first steps on how do we encourage that. And also conversations happening across government are around, well, if we are going to invest into new infrastructure for education, how do we do that in a way that local businesses can benefit as well? So the schools absolutely need that new infrastructure, but when we make that investment, how do we do it that it's not just the students and the teachers and the families through the education system that benefit, but that we can do it in a way that's similar to the vibe of QCN Fibre. It can be opened up and it can provide those better connectivity for local businesses, local councils, etc. So they're the conversations that we're having. I can't make any, amazing announcements and say, yes, and next week we're going to do this. But it is something that as we have these conversations and as we make investments into new infrastructure, we will be doing it in a lot smarter way.
Well said. Esteem. So I keep saying you've got to put the E at the front of STEM or STEAM, and it's entrepreneurship. Like when we think about STEM programs in school, how do we instill within our kids the design thinking, the challenge-led situations? How do we do that? Let's hope we get there before I get to a nursing home.
I've probably got two questions. I think one for the government representative, and then I'm interested to find out firstly if you're an innovator and you have an idea, you might have some support evidence from universities and that type of thing. I guess at what stage do someone like your organisation get involved with a new venture, so to speak? And the other thing is, I'm also involved in a not-for-profit organisation, and culture is something that has a big impact on motivation, and the government, is there innovative businesses making impact in government organisations?
You're working it hard today.
Yeah, we'll meet in the middle. Okay, so was the second question for me?
Both of them.
Oh, yeah, rightio, why not? So I'll take the second question first because I'm a bit contrary. So we recognise that a lot of people see government as grants programs, and government has grants programs. People that we speak to tell us that they would much rather a contract over a grant, like to be a customer of government over getting a grant. And what we're doing in the Department of Education is last question I was referring to, within the innovation agenda in government, one of the things we're trying to do is drive innovation in government. And government's a large beast. I'm not going to pretend any different. It can be a labyrinth and it can be very risk averse. And there's good reason for that. We're spending all of our money. We're all taxpayers. And so it can lead to some very risk adverse procurement practices. So what we have been doing in this space, we've got a program called Sparkplug that we have implemented, and it's really trying to we work with people in government who want to go and procure from innovative businesses throughout Queensland, but they don't know who to go to, they don't know if they're taking a real risk, so they tend to go to what they think of as the safe options. And so through the Sparkplug program, what we do is we have government agencies come to talk to us about specific things because they want to know who to talk to. One of the things is drones. So last year we noticed a few government agencies were coming to say, we think we need to get into drones, we don't know what to do. And so we ran a session through Sparkplug on drones where we went out to the innovators that we knew at the time because they may have engaged with Office of Chief Entrepreneur, they may have engaged with our programs. And so we just got the people in government who were interested and put them in a room with people to pitch to them. There were no promises. We can't, make people buy things. But what we can do is get the right people in the room to have the conversations and make the connections. We've done another one with circular economy. And so we certainly, and in some of those we have had regional people represented because initially people thought you had to be in Brisbane to pitch. And I think one of the things we've seen through COVID as well that people understand, you can do these things really effectively through Zoom, through digital means. So that's one of the sort of programs that we've run, but one of the things that we really want to try and be is that connector, that we do encourage government to be a lead customer of innovative Queensland businesses. And I actually think, never waste a disaster, and I think that the appetite of government to procure from local Queensland companies would be much stronger at the moment. So we'll continue to explore ways that we can do that and programs. But yeah, feel free to reach out to us, of course. I should have introduced before, and I feel terrible that I didn't, but Carmel, who is here, she is our expert from the innovation agenda for this particular region, because, as I said, what we're trying to do is have that deeper connection. And Carmel was the perfect, obvious choice because while she's based mostly in Brisbane at the moment, she is born and bred quite proudly from this area, and so it's great to have her being able to connect up here. So I'll get Carmel to say a few words in a minute just so that you know how you can connect with her. But back to now, I have to remember your first question, which was... Oh, yeah, how do you engage? At what stage does government get involved? Yep. So, look, state, local, federal government, there's a whole range of ways you can get involved. What we have, and we're just updating it at the moment, is what we call a journey map. And what that shows it, because there's a whole range of programs out there and it's hard to know, right, what to engage with at what stage. If you've got an idea, where do you go, versus if you've got a prototype or an MVP, a different type of thing. So you can reach out to us, and when we finish updating it, it'll be up on the website, etc. But reach out to us right now and talk us through where you're at, and we can, hopefully direct you either to us or elsewhere. What I will give a plug to everyone in the room to explore is we recently have launched a platform called QI Hub, and so it's an online platform for Queensland innovators, and it's funded by government, but it is meant to be owned by the innovation community within Queensland. We don't want to be out telling people what they need and what they don't need. So it's only launched about 6 weeks ago, I think. It's already got about 750 members. And it's a space for people to go on. They can register as a founder, as a startup. They can register as an investor interested in looking at companies to invest in. They can invest as a co-working hub. There's a whole range. Leanne puts her jobs up there.
I do.
Yeah. And so what we want it to be is a platform that's owned by community, that community can then help themselves. So if you, for example, have an idea and you're at that stage and you don't know where potentially to go, without giving up any of your IP, you can just put out what you're comfortable with, and people from the community, probably, before we do, they will connect you to some of the sources they've found. So that's called QI Hub, and it's qihub.com, but we can give you those details on that later, and I would encourage you all to connect with that.
Now
Look what happens when they start talking, I tell you.
My name is Carmel Crathern. I won't talk for too long. Yes, born and bred in Cairns, but been to Tablelands a number of times. Love it up here. I've been working a lot with Callum and Christine through the Regional Council and with Startup and Innovation Tablelands, just to try and identify programs that we can run to assist innovators and bring you all together. As Dr. Sarah Pearson, our Deputy Director General, says, innovation is a contact sport. So it's really important that we have that interaction with each other. I will provide my details to Callum and to Christine, and they can pass them on to you, and you can connect with me that way. But I'll be back up here again very soon.
Thank you, Carmel. Now, we also have another question from the live stream. So, this is from Wendy. Innovation tends to be driven by product and service delivery. How can we also facilitate driving innovation by learning from nature? Farmers then capitalise on the millions of years of free intellectual property embedded in natural systems. instead of substituting for it.
If only we've evolved as humans. Look, there's a lot to be learned. I think when we, where do I start? The Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, right? Really important principles and a very important body. It's clear that across Queensland, we are only just learning from the mistakes we have made and continuously make, whether that be thinking about the water table that exists within the Great Barrier Reef, and whether that looks at the quality of soils, or whether it's the fact that we have an insane amount of single-use plastics that still reside on this planet, let alone in this state. So I would say that there are a number of evolutions that are occurring, both within the systems level thinking of what this means in terms of capitalism as we once knew it is effectively gone, that we need to start thinking about not just only shareholder value that we create within our organisations, but stakeholder value, people and planet as stakeholders to every business or every supply chain. And these are large, really large, important manifestos that are being driven across the world. Manifesto around stakeholder value was released in January in Davos and has subsequently been led out with the World Economic Forum and even promoted and embedded within Airbnb as a prime, part of the work that they're doing in custodianship. From a Queensland perspective, certainly the Department of Science and Environment are also looking at synthetic biology, ways upon which we can, grow our ways out of single-use plastics. Is there ways to ensure that the principles of the use of our materials, given that they're finite, we need to rethink those in entirely different ways. So we're on our way, but we need to evolve as humans to get there quicker. Next generation. No pressure, mate. That's on your shoulders.
We're down to our final couple of questions, so I'm just getting my steps up today.
You're doing well. I feel like I'm in an Oprah Winfrey show, and I'm about to say, and so everyone check under your seats.
Thanks, Anne. I just actually wanted to add to the answer to that question that just came through. I think one thing that COVID has, so I'm Dr. Geraldine Maguire. I run a couple of businesses up here. I'm a scientist, an entrepreneur, and one of the things we've found is what COVID has done is give people time to sit and be quiet and stop rushing around and to start rethinking their behaviours and their purchasing patterns as well. And there's been a really big shift that we've noticed in trying to purchase products that have less impact on our environment. And so the word for that kind of farming and those products is regenerative agriculture. It's about rebuilding soil health, about rebuilding biodiversity. And what we found in our business is people spending patterns have changed as a result of COVID. So I think, what did someone say, through every disaster we have to make the most of that, thanks to Nicole. And I see really big positive changes happening, and our region is really well placed to be a leader in regenerative agriculture, with our opportunities here with clean, green, and provenance and authenticity. So there's if you're an entrepreneur in the room and that's something that excites you, then there's a huge opportunity here. There's a really sweet spot that COVID has presented to us.
Yeah, I've always said to the Premier we need to rename the entire state of Queensland to Queensland, which I think it'd be pretty easy to do. QLENSLAND, pretty simple, easy spelling mistake, hashtag it. Queensland.
I'm Richard Hole. I'm an inventor of a lot of different ideas and projects, but I know how hard it is to actually invent things because we can't find the right people to help often. So I'd be interested in that hub which you were talking about, that online hub there. If we can get a bit more information on that, it may be able to help us find the form database of honest. It may be, they'll be interested in that online hub. It'd be good to be able to form or find the database of honest companies and organisations to help inventors and start-up businesses, because there's a lot of them out there that aren't quality sort of thing. It's already well going through the yellow pages and things like that. There's databases, but what we need somebody to screen them basically so that they're honest and good value for money too, because there's a lot of people out there that aren't good value. But if we could find the people who are good value for money, who can help the start-up businesses and inventors, that would really help them, because we don't know who to turn to. And we haven't got time either inventing things. I just take on too many projects. There's a lot of time involved in inventing things, but if we had somebody, we really need somebody else to help us basically promote our products or manufacture it, because there's a lot of inventions out there, they're just going to waste. But what we need somebody out there to actually help us to connect to the right people to help manufacture it and market it. Because the problems are all solved out there. There's all sorts of things that can solve our problems. I even invented a device could even stop COVID. You know, a mask, which is much better like a veil that goes over your head. It would be much better sort of thing. I've got a lot of other inventions, and there's a lot of other people out there could solve the world's problems. So if only we had somebody to help promote them, because we don't get time to do it. We need somebody. It'd be good if we could find or form a database of honest companies and inventors to help inventors and startups. Thanks.
Brilliant. Yeah, QI Hub's definitely.
I've got a paper here. If you want any more information, please ask me for a paper on that too. I've got just to summarise it basically. So just let me know if you want the information
Brilliant.
on that. Yeah, thanks.
So QI Hub definitely is the first place to go. And then when we think about manufacturing, you said advanced manufacturing, we have manufacturing hubs in Queensland now. So in Cairns, Rockhampton, Townsville and Brisbane, where prototypes or rapid prototypes can be created as well. So, and then of course the AI hub exists, a robotics hub exists. So dependent upon the type of thing that you're inventing or the tools needed to enable that invention, then there are many different places in Queensland that can help with that. But certainly the connection directly into Advanced Queensland is one, into the Startup Innovation Hub here is also important, and then the Chief Entrepreneur's Office as well. You can stalk me online, I'm easy to find. I've got everything, yeah. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, TikTok and everything. I'm even on that Spotify thing too for the unkempt.
And you turn up in person.
And I turn up in person, yeah. And you can't shut me up either, so you're going well tonight.
We love that. I'd like to add another question to what has been suggested. One of the things, I'm just going to make a quick comment. One of the things we were going to do in ST was to work on this QI hub and get everybody together and working on it. Of course, then we found out that Leanne was coming, so we dropped that project, but we will be bringing that forward again so that everybody understands how to use the website and how we can get the most benefit out of it as a group as well as individually. But one of the observations that I've made sort of fits in with one of our, with several of the questions, which is that of the people who put their hands up to come to the group consultation with Leanne this morning, who were all entrepreneurs, I was amazed that everybody was more interested, at least as interested in supporting this community, as they were in starting a business. And I have taken an interest in social enterprise, which may or may not be a label that some of you know, certainly Leanne and her colleagues do. But my question is, how can we manage it so that the entrepreneurial silo and the social enterprise silo actually start to collaborate and move together?
That is an awesome question. So I'm often
I'm so glad.
Yeah. When I first became Queensland's chief entrepreneur, I wanted to make sure that I had my two favourite pets with me. Now, I wasn't allowed a dog and a cat into the office, so I decided I'd bring my two favourite pet passions. One is circular economy, which of course is an economic construct that sits beneath sustainability, to reuse, recycle, repurpose, to rethink entire value chains, not just supply chains. And the second part is social enterprise and social entrepreneurship, and how do we actually put a number of resources around that. I'm pretty excited and proud to say that Minister Fentiman, who is the Minister for Small Business, has driven a set of programs around social enterprise and social entrepreneurship. Last year released $500,000 in grant funding that was afforded $50,000 chunks to social enterprise. There's been an entire set of work across the state to also understand those that are impact investors that are interested in companies that are leading out in profit for purpose vehicles, right? Not just not-for-profits. We also have QSEC, which is Queensland Social Enterprise Council, a formal council, a body of people that are focused on this. We also managed, in a short period of time, to convince the Social Enterprise Procurement Officer from the Brisbane City Council to join state government and to help drive procurement policy that deliberately pulls out the commitment to procurement spend, so what governments are buying, from social enterprise. The same too, in similar work, is being done in Indigenous communities and Indigenous procurement. So we have a significant amount of support here in Queensland in comparison to other states. And not only that, it's often difficult to be it if you can't see it. We see this in schools all the time. Anyone know Orange Sky?
Yep.
Anyone know Obama? You know that guy? The president? The rememberable president? So in December, he called out the founders of Orange Sky as the social enterprise standout for the year. So arguably, we have one of the best social enterprises in the world sitting right here in Queensland, 5 minutes down the road from the Chief Entrepreneur's office. So we have an incredible, deep sense of understanding about what it is in social enterprise. We are already aware, and there's a champion minister that is saying this is a really important sector to small business and sector to the community, and has deliberately put resources behind that, and has also made pledged commitments, and I've been in the room consistently, month upon month upon month, driving those roundtables, the agenda, the work, and everything to be done. So we have a QSEC representative that is connected, and JCU in Cairns is doing a significant amount of work in roadmaps as well as in plans around social enterprise for far north Queensland and above, and also CQU, is it Central Queensland University? Yeah, CQU is also up here, big social enterprise university. So you got it?
Yeah, very much so. I'm on the steering committee of Social Enterprise North Network for the Tropics. Almost couldn't get the acronym right. So if anybody's interested in learning more about social enterprise and combining that with your entrepreneurialism, please get in touch with me.
Yeah, I feel like Queensland has this kind of binge watch equivalent when it comes to social enterprises here. Like it's like the Netflix of entrepreneurship is in social enterprise. Yeah, it's nature inspiring, it's value creation, it's a sense of community, it's all things good. The next evolution. Darwin would be very impressed with our evolution pathway on social enterprise.
I think you're right. Now, I have grabbed the microphone for the last question for a reason. That's that I'd like to express some thanks before Callum closes us down for the evening. I'd like Seamus to come up, and I'd like you two ladies from Brisbane to come along, because we want to thank all of you here for coming. And we especially want to thank our visitors for having turned up and for answering. Yes, please. Just a tiny bit of news from Startup and Innovation Tablelands. We held our AGM whilst you were out noshing and nibbling and networking with Leanne. And Seamus and I will be the new co-chairs this year. Now, what we plan to do is to create a succession plan, and then we're going to quit Startup Tablelands, and we're going to start a young entrepreneurs club, because we're tired of hanging out with old fogies, right, Seamus? We got to get a few less wrinkles and a few less gray beards, so we're going to do it. But I have one more thing to do, and that's to thank Callum. Callum has been my co-chair this year for Startup and Innovation Tablelands. He has been an angel, an absolute heaven-sent gift to us. We all have a huge amount of affection and admiration for Callum and for his work, and for that reason, we don't want him to resign. Well, he has resigned, And we've decided to make him an official honorary lifetime driver of Startup Tablelands because we don't want to let him go. Now I'll hand back to you, Seamus, and you can close off the day. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Christine. That's very nice. I'll have to get you to write that down for my fiancée, that I can just show her every now and again that I am an angel. Look, there's not much left for me to say after that. Thank you again to all of you for coming. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to have Leanne and Nicole and Carmel here, and we really appreciate it. I think it's worth mentioning, Leanne, this is her second year as Chief Entrepreneur. You mentioned this afternoon you've travelled around Queensland 71,000 kilometres last year. Does a fair bit of time outside of the house, which is not always fun or easy, but she's fit us in up here twice in the last 12 months. So we really appreciate that you've valued our region and that you've come to support us, and hearing your words and your insights is always a fantastic opportunity. So thank you so much to all three of you for coming and speaking tonight. We really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for coming, and we'll wrap it up there. Destiny's not going to boot us out straight away, so don't feel the need to run out the door. Leanne will be around for another couple of minutes, but then does have to duck out. So thanks very much.